to sign the corpse to go to the parlor as they requested over the phone, she noticed that all of the sutures were healed. Not the sutures, the tears were healed, even though it was still a corpse. And that's when she realized that God was healing a corpse just to prove that he can heal anything.
When did you understand that your visit to heaven was over, and what was the experience like to come back then and enter your physical body?
Initially, it was total hell. Now, this is the miracle, and probably one that won't be understood by many of the people that are listening, but listen closely now. The first sensation I had, and I don't know how many hours later, from 4 to 10 later probably, was the greatest agony that can be only imagined. It was so much worse than our human sensory system can stand that we'd go into shock long before that. And the interesting thing was that I was not feeling it with my mind. I knew later, but not at the moment. I could distinguish as individual cells every cell in my body. And every cell was screaming in torment. From my toes, my fingers, my hands, my belly, everything. Total agony, total screaming. And it only lasted about 2 seconds, perhaps. And when it went, I then said, Jesus. Now I had my mind again, the mind of Christ again. I was, to learn later, I was lying in bed, a corpse, waiting to be disposed of somewhere. And he came back, put his mind back, and for 2 minutes, or for 2 seconds, gave me that unbelievable. And I said, quickly, Jesus, why? Why did you hurt me like that? And he said, my son, did you read the book? He said, I told you in the book that I was slain from the foundation, before the foundation of the earth, to bear everyone's iniquities and agonies and pain and sorrow. And he said, I just wanted to give you a little idea of what it meant. And he said, further in my book, I told you that my body of believers is like the body we created out of clay, in that it consists of cells that touch one another. And he said, there's billions of cells in my body. And he said, every one of those cells has had pain, which I bore on the cross. And he said, you have now experienced for this little bit, because I knew you couldn't any longer, what it means to be totally aware, as I am, of every individual cell in my body, and how it's hurting, and when it's hurting, and where it's hurting. And then later he was to go tell me, go tell them that I died for them, whether they know it or not.
How soon after you came back from heaven were you well and able to be up and around? God healed you then, didn't he?
It wasn't the overnight miracle. He healed me to the point that it's after 6 the next morning, having gone in 11 the previous morning, then 6 the next morning, I became conscious with a brain of my own, which only works at the speed of very slow, see. And I was able to detect that I had been in a bad accident, because it was obvious. He left enough then that I would know that anything that ever happened after that was his power and not mine. So it would have been, what, from 11, 6, 7, 18 hours. And then, of course, it was a matter of several weeks before I was strong enough to get over the initial of trauma. Everything in my body was pretty well damaged in some way. But that first hour, the Lord came into my room while I'm a corpse, gave me again for a moment the spirit mind, which has spirit eyes. Now these spirit eyes are something that are talked about. They see everything, any distance, anywhere, front, back, side, up and down. It's the eternal eye of God. And I had been given that eye, and instantly I was looking at the corpse. It had my face, a rather disturbing thing. I had no blood, was lying there totally as a corpse, inert. And it was then that he spoke. I didn't see him. And he said, my son, I just returned in order to give you the answer to my promise that I gave you during the night, that with your hands you will heal, and my peace I will give unto you. And then we had an anatomy lesson and began. I was telling him where I thought I'd start and how to do it. And of course, we had a lot of fun. You know, Jesus is a fun person. If we just treat him as though he was living next door, he's a neighbor.
Yes, yes. Oh, amen.
We put him on such a pedestal, which he belongs, the pedestal is his, but he steps down off the pedestal to the lowest child. He steps down to anybody that's a drunk, to anybody that's a professor. He doesn't care. For him, it's stepping down to any level of our society to come and talk to us.
Doctor, what's the bottom line? Why did Jesus let you have this experience?
I've asked him many times. Now, there's no question that he gave me the answer 5 years later when you and I were over in Israel. And that's when he took me into Lazarus' tomb. And for 2 minutes, the light went out. For 2 minutes, the people with me were gone.
Hold it right there. Don't miss the second part of this fascinating story and testimony. The answer will come as Dr. Eby shares this second great experience that he had over in the land of Israel. Actually with Jan and me and a whole group of TBN partners who were visiting over there in a deep little dark dungeon known as Lazarus' tomb. We'll go there in just a minute, okay? And if you have prayer needs, phone the men right now. Many of you are calling. Some are even calling, aren't they, honey, to receive Christ. And we're going to agree with you. Jesus, hey, if he can bring a Dr. Eby back from the dead and restore him, if he can bring a Lazarus who's been dead 4 days back from the grave, your little problem is nothing for God. He can do anything, and he wants to. That's the good news we want to share with you tonight. Get ready. We're going to pray with you, and we're going to agree with you for your needs right now. This will be a good time to get to your phone as Sylvester Blue sings.